It's Kerry from Mindful Moves, and today we're going to be talking about the right brain learner. When we talk left brain, right brain learners, one thing we really want to understand is the role that fear and anxiety play in the play out of how I'm going to be thinking through problems. And so when I'm calm and I'm not in fight or flight, I'm able to think from a more whole brain state. However, when I have stresses trigger my learning profile, what that means is I go into fight or flight, and my mind-body system then has to decide, how do I organize myself under stress? And of course I move, as I say, from this whole brain thinking to a limited profile depending on how each and every one of our brains and body have decided that looks for them. So first of all, it's really important to realize that stress is important in life, and when in balance with our resources, it is seen as a challenge. As we overcome our challenges, we grow and develop. And of course, we see this with children and babies who have the support of their parents, who have an environment conducive to learning. And so as they have all of this support and resources, they're able to learn to roll, to crawl, to walk, to interact. Unfortunately, as we get older or as we get exposed to more and more stresses and perhaps don't develop life skills or just can't cope, what ends up happening so often is that our stress outweighs the resources that we have in order to cope. And this is when we have big problems in life, and this is where we battle to move forward. We also see that reflexes come into play. And what are reflexes? So reflexes are part of this beautiful package that we're born with, along with our basal profile. And what do? They allow for the child to survive. So they involuntary movements that are there, that are triggered by sensory stimuli, enabling the baby to have the best chance of survival. These should get packed away, so never go away, but get packed away as the body gets stronger, as movement becomes more coordinated, and we can voluntarily choose to respond rather than react to the world around us. And so yes, our positive stresses are called eustress and are very good for us when in balance with our resources. However, as I say, the more kids I'm dealing with, the more we're seeing this overwhelming amount of stress, fear and anxiety that just by no means is helpful to anybody. So in this slide, we just show how our work ties in beautifully with Maslow's law of hierarchy. And of course, as you know, with Maslow's law of hierarchy, I have to start at the base with a strong foundation. And as I spend more time making sure that all those fundamentals are in place, so it means I can build a higher, stronger pyramid or tower. And so I've divided it to show you where, as I say, our functional areas of the brain come in. So the first functional area we talk about is focus. Other words that we talk about in this functional area are participation, locomotion, comprehension, focus, and one I like to talk about, motivation. Without these things, nothing can happen in life, because it's in this place where I decide, am I going to participate in the world around me, or am I going to withdraw and avoid? The question that we ask during this space is, am I safe? It's got everything to do with attentional intelligence, and it's the first to develop. We can see that without this, we will not feel safe enough to interact and connect with others. Once this is in place, I can move on to my second functional area, all about connecting. And here we've got words like to organize, bonding. And so this asks, what am I in relationship to myself and others, objects, people, and things? And so the question, who do I connect with, or I connect? And asking, where am I in relationship to people, places, and objects? Everything about this functional area of the brain has to do with emotional intelligence. It's the second to develop and has got everything to do with feeling. This is the area of the brain where we talk about short-term memory moving over to long-term memory. It's also the place that generates pleasure and anxiety, also releasing hormones and talking very much about relationships. When this is in place, I can then have a self-actualization where I see morality, creativity, spontaneity, and acceptance. It's in this space that I ask, who am I and I can answer by saying I know who I am. I also ask the question, what is it? And this is our academic functional area, where we've got informational intelligence. It's all about processing, thinking, crossing the midline, coordination, integration, communication. It's about, as we said before, thinking, processing, communicating. It allows us to form complex memory, thought, and reason. It's where language acquisition happens, where we express ourselves on a verbal and non-verbal level, as well as a written level. And it is this connection between the left and the right brain. So Dr. Carla Hannaford, in her course, The Dominance Factor, Optimal Brain Organization, talks about this little man that we see in front here called the Domino Man. And in this we learn about the different brain profiles. And so yes, it is very important to understand that stress triggers these profiles. And under stress, we are not able to think from this whole brain. Each person also operates incredibly differently under stress. So to understand what role reflexes play in this, we see that reflexes also trigger our learning profile, because when reflexes are triggered, the mind-body system again gets the message that I am under threat, I am in danger. And so of course, as these reflexes are triggered, so my learning profile is triggered. If you want to learn more, because it's quite astounding what each of these reflexes mean for a child, if they're still active, you're welcome to go have a look at reflexes such as the fear paralysis reflex, the Moro reflex, the spinal gland, Landau reflex, the STNR, the Perez and Vollmer, the plantar and palmar reflex, and then the ATNR, STNR, and of course the TLR. And if you do our work, as I say, you will come to realize to what extent these can be quite damaging if still active, not only physically, but emotionally and academically in a child's life. I've added this here, and this is a very, very well-known picture that often does its rounds. And here we've got schools cut recess and PE to their own detriment. Even if kids aren't running, they're winning. Above are composites of MRI brain scans of 20 students taking the same test, measured by the University of Illinois researcher Dr. Chuck Hillman. The red section represents the highest amount of neuroelectric activity within the brain. What do we see here? We see how sitting still in a classroom is in actual fact a stressor. And in that scan there we can see there's no red, there's no orange, and there's a very little bit of yellow. We see that this particular student is actually more left-brained when we look at their learning profile, and also more thinking about the receptive part of the brain, as more of the back part of that brain is active. After just walking for 20 minutes, we can see the difference here. And even though we can still see more activity taking place in the left brain side, we can now see there is far more activity in the right. And so this child, after moving, has been able to activate his brain, all three functional areas, so that now he's thinking, or she is thinking from a more whole brain state. So just to look at some of the things within the brain hemispheres, we can see what each of them are responsible for. We see that our left brain child works from pieces to whole, works with language, is language orientated, is planned and uses like structure, future orientated, time conscious, controls feelings, structured, looks at the syntax and schematics when doing speech, looks for differences, enjoys letters, printing, spelling, sequence, verbal numbers, printing, analysis, is very logical, likes technique, very linear in terms of thinking, enjoys steps, so step 1, step 2, step 3, enjoys details, enjoys things that are abstract, and also ironically or interestingly, let's put it that way, music, notes and timing. Our child who is thinking with more the right brain tends to think from the whole picture to pieces, enjoys language comprehension, image, emotion and meaning, estimation, application. They are free with their feelings, enjoys rhythm, dialect and application, looks for similarities, flows, likes flow and movement, now orientated, enjoys patterns, prefers drawing and manipulation to letters, printing and spelling. Simultaneous thinking, so we're talking multitasking here, learns through colour, visualization. These learners tend to be tactile and kinesthetic learners. Spontaneous, fluid, intuition, very intuitive, picking up on the feeling of a room and a temperature. Has less time sense and more people orientated. And of course, as we see that and we start worrying about concentration and how children are learning in our class, we can see how the right brain learner is going to need to play to incorporate emotion, imagination, colour, shape, pictures. It's going to need to move and learn and pick up things and handle them in order to anchor new learning. And so let's see what weaknesses each hemisphere might have. And we see the left brain weaknesses include poor math skills, poor verbal skills, poor spelling skills, poor reading skills, fine motor problems, poor letter recognition, poor auditory processing, weak immune system, poor memory for details, tends to miss small details, poor self-esteem, poor motivation, and task avoidance. The person who's left-brained and has a right-brained weakness might appear clumsy or awkward, hyperactive, anxious, have poor non-verbal skills, might be impulsive and lack focus, might present with poor reading comprehension, obsessive or repetitive behavior, immature social behavior, allergies, autoimmune problems, lack interest in sports, might miss the big picture, have poor eye contact, and may also be a space invader. As each of us goes to our pole under stress, this is what we see, left brain versus right brain. And so my left brain child with a learning profile, as I say, with a more left brain hemisphere, will begin to try incredibly hard with lots of effort and without results. Without comprehension, they will steer away from feeling and become very black and white. Without understanding, and may appear tense, mechanical, or insensitive. Where my right brain learner loses, now listen carefully because this is what happens to some of these kids during tests, but loses the ability to reason well, acts without thinking, feels overwhelmed, so lots of feeling going on here, has trouble expressing, cannot remember details, and may appear angry, frustrated, or depressed. And so how does this scenario play out in real life? Imagine, worst case scenario, you've lost someone that you love. The left brain person is the one who seems to be very cold, sorting things out, giving things away, working with the will, working with the documentation, straight away getting to things. Whereas the right brain learner looks at the left brain person and says this person is cold and callous and they haven't even been, in the grave for how many days, and this person's just throwing away their life. They become incredibly sentimental and cannot move forward. The left brain person looks at this other person and says, but they just can't get their act together and there's stuff to be done. And sadly, we have family feuds and fallings out over these two people who are incredibly stressed, but each presenting differently. So just to have a look at how this is playing out in the classroom, this comes from this book. So the dominance factor, how knowing your dominant eye, ear, brain, hand and foot can improve your learning, and by Dr. Carla Hannaford. So this just goes to show in a diagram from this book how this plays out in the classroom, especially in classrooms that cater for the more left brain child. And so we see in the 1990, this is an extract from her book, using the basal dominance profiles are collected from a random samples of 218 students attending schools in Denver, Colorado and Kona, Hawaii. These students were identified by the following labels according to assessment criteria used in school. So we see the blue one there, gifted and talented. And so just look at the orange, which is your left brain child, versus the green, the gestalt or right brain. And we see how children are being classed as gifted and talented who are left brain. Obviously are almost 80 students there. Whereas when we move over to that green side there, they are sitting just over 20 students in this handful or in this selection. Normal, and this is the white bar as we move across there, they were doing okay in regular class, and we see how this graph is now stepping down to the left-hand side, but actually stepping up to our right side where we've got the Gestalt learners. Remedial, that turquoise color, children struggling with reading. Again, dropping on that bar, dropping on the left, saying that less of these children are battling. However, we move over to the right-hand side, gestalt, right brain, and more children are battling. Our darker purple there, or our darker, in the next column. So we've got high school redirect, an alternative high school for students who had previously dropped out or been suspended from their high schools. Dropping in the left-hand side, and again increasing in that gestalt side. And finally, special educational emotional handicap, so children labelled with learning problems such as attention deficit disorder, Asperger's or dyslexia. And we see the lowest with our left brain learners, but the highest with our right brain learners. So really scary stuff. Now, though we get many different types of learning styles, this one was the one mentioned again, saying that these are the types of learners that are often right-brained. So your kinesthetic learners, learning through movement and experiencing the information. And in the middle of that little desk, we see how does the learner learn and what can the teacher do. So these children who are more kinesthetic learn or need to touch and do in order to take information in. These learners seek physical movement and can be good at sports. These learners like hands-on learning and enjoy drawing rather than listening or watching. They like to try new things for themselves. They remember best when the learner has done it for themselves. The learner may fidget. Now this is very important. The learner may fidget when they have sat still for too long, remembering that sitting still is actually a stressor. They also, or when they're getting bored, and these children are going to get into trouble for not paying attention or fidgeting in the classroom. These learners may suffer from short attention span and find it difficult to focus when sitting still. Why? Because this isn't natural for the way in which these particular learners learn. Now, not every right brain learner is going to be a kinesthetic learner, and that's why we do profiling with our children, so that we can figure out exactly how it is that your child learns and their particular learning profile, how they learn under stress. And so yes, according to each child and how they present, how their brain has organized itself, they're going to be limited to a different extent. So getting back to this one, if I do have a kinesthetic learner, what can the teacher do? So actively doing something is going to help. Role play or acting out new learning, using concrete counters for skills, so working through experiments or moving while learning. Older learners will benefit from a case study. Discussing new concepts with others will also help this learner to remember better. Break study sessions up into shorter sessions, with breaks that allow moving around, walking around, and other physical movement activity. And this is where I love our work, because this is when we start using our movement programs along with academic work, so that we get that brain, like you saw earlier, shifting from that one-sided thinking. And of course, walking is very powerful, but our moves, our designed moves are fantastic. And when you know how to use them and how to bring them in, you can work very specifically on which functional area you want to be bringing in. So also information is taken in best when accompanied with an activity. Find out about our activities. Active learning might include role plays and problem solving. These learners must move when study, and they may tap a pencil, click a pen, squeeze a ball, shake their foot if appropriate. And in fact, this actually helps them to focus. These learners might find that typing assists them in learning. Don't want to take away writing from them. Writing in itself is movement, and so we absolutely want them also to be able to write. So I've just added a little bit more of our work. So again, we look at dominant legs, and that's what we're looking at where we look at here. And so if you want to find out more what the left foot represents here, spontaneous movement, enjoys free movement, rhythmic movement, and moving with emotions and intuitively, while the right foot likes to move in a very planned manner, enjoys following step by step and techniques, moving towards something in an orderly fashion. So let's just take a look at what strategies can I use to help these children. So again, I would talk you through this after doing a profiling session, and we talk about strategies. We talk about what vitamins we could be including, what nutrition we should be including. We could then speak very specifically about lessons, and this work is absolutely fantastic in tutor centres or when we're working one-on-one with kids in a homeschooling setup. Because there is just this place and this space, to move and bring things together and start using the body as the vehicle or as the instrument of learning, rather than the sitting still and trying to. I watched that funny little cute little guy who was just basically trying to put the information in his head. And of course, this is what sometimes I feel school is about, is this putting of information in, rather than applying, experiencing, interacting with the information and the curriculum in a very real and relevant way that adds meaning to a child's life. And so yes, this type of stuff is done so well in that setup. So we also want, if you've got a right brain child, to be teaching in a right brain manner. We want to incorporate each child's way of ordering and processing their work, and of course you will find that out through the profiling session as to what that means for your particular child. Incorporating love languages, because this is how we reward our kids and respond appropriately when they're doing the right things. Rewarding them for effort, perseverance, for doing better, for a better work ethic, as opposed to high marks and good results. Remembering that you could have a bad day or just not quite understand a concept. And of course, that's going to happen when we get to that point. It happens to all of us. However, if I have rewarded perseverance, I will never give up and I will continue until I come right. And that's what we want from our children. We also want to incorporate very special, or each specific intelligence and what that means for the children. Again, that would be something that you'd find out in a profiling session. And then, yes, our very specific designed moves that are going to mean peak performance for that child. So, ways that we like to put things together, we always start with a goal. What is the reason for doing this? What is the outcome that I want, having done this terrible math sum, for instance, or having to push through this very difficult lesson? What is my goal and how is it relevant to me today? We then want to warm up. No runner just runs, because they'll pull a muscle, they'll get injured, they will cause damage. And so yes, we warm up in our work. We also then start by assessing prior knowledge. What do I have in place? What hangers, we call it in the mind, do I have? What can I hook on new information to? As information comes into the brain's got to very quickly decide, is this relevant? Do I keep it? Was it something enjoyable that's going to stand out? Then it's hardwired straight away. Can I hook it onto previous knowledge? That information sticks. Or am I going to get rid of it and disregard it because it's irrelevant and I can't make sense of it? I don't have enough in place to physically catch that concept. Mentally catch that concept. We then want to work for about 20 minutes, and you must remember, we as adults don't even talk or listen for longer than 20 minutes. And so 20 minutes is just about the end of many people's tether. And I can remember doing a very important lesson when we spoke about talking in front of people, and the John Wesley used to give people a written warning if they had actually stood up and in actual fact preached longer than 20 minutes. And he said it's purely because people can't concentrate for longer than that. If you want to find out how it is that it should be, we're looking at that each person should be able to concentrate between 2 to 3 minutes of their age in years. But again, 20 minutes is a good amount of time before we're going to break it up into and give it a movement. And then post-activity and reward to see what have we learned. Revise and go over what we've already covered and what is stuck. See if the child can word it in their own words, if they're able to teach it back, and reward them for their efforts and their perseverance. Then we're going to break, have water, and we can then go into that next lesson. So again, just out of this fantastic book, we run a course on it, also a workshop. So get in touch if you want to find out more. But how do we start bringing more right brain learning into the classroom? Through brainstorms, through visualizing unusual images in your mind's eye, through the use of pictures and symbol maps. And that's opposed to like just your spider map written out. Paying more attention to gut instincts and trusting your intuition. Being aware of the emotions and how to express them, especially joyous ones. Being physically active, especially with high integrated non-competitive activities such as hiking, swimming, yoga, Tai Chi and Brain Gym. Learn to accept and be comfortable with ambiguity and paradox. Use metaphors and emotional stories whenever possible. Practice saying things in a new way or other words. Talk more slowly. Use less words. Play with impressionistic and freeform colour painting, sculpture and dance, and role play. And while we use this, we want to then start developing for our right brain learner these left brain skills. So we're going to start teaching them how to make a list, how to prioritize, how to sequence and use flowcharts. We're going to teach them to pay attention to details, to be time conscious, so actually teaching them time management skills, to make sure that they finish what they've started. We can use objective measures and quantify and use statistics. So of course we're going to teach them how to do that. Analyze decisions and go through logical reasoning processes. The next one I love, list advantages and disadvantages of a decision and rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. Give them a number rating. Break large concepts into smaller pieces, using outlines, drawing pictures, which is more right brain, making mind maps to clarify the relationship, so that right brain bringing it into left brain learning. Enjoys numerical sequencing, so that's usually your left brain person who enjoys it. We want to start establishing it with our right brain learner. Observes detail with line drawings or draftings, so we want them to begin to observe more line detail, take it away from that colour. Sequencing when communicating, so teaching them to say there are 3 points in this discussion. Number 1 is, so that they can begin to practice that step-by-step order. And then study and remember the details, so trying to remember the details, again bringing the right brain in so that they could learn in this more left brain manner. And then of course teaching them to read and follow instructions. So yes, we've got many courses on this and other stuff to help teachers and parents, especially with these children who are more right brain battling in a left brain class. And if you want to find out more, you can, yes, subscribe and like and watch more videos, but you're also more than welcome to get hold of us at Mindful Moves. Book a profiling session. Let's find out how your particular child learns or your student is learning, and let's start seeing what strategies we can put in place to assist them.